It is really my profound honor to open up this discussion today with Deborah Burlingame. Deborah Burlingame is the co-founder of the 9/11 Families for a Safe and Strong America and a director of the National September 11th Memorial and Museum Foundation at the World Trade Center. She's published feature articles for the Wall Street Journal and other publications on national security matters, including the Patriot Act, the National Security Agency Terrorist Surveillance Program, Al-Qaeda and the Saddam Hussein regime, the 9/11 Commission, aviation security, and the Guantanamo detainees. She's testified before the Senate and the U.S. House of Representatives on terrorism-related issues and works with the Center for Security Policy as an advocate for its Divest terror program aimed at Iran, Syria, Sudan, and North Korea. Ms. Burlingame has appeared on NBC's Today Show, Fox, O'Reilly's Factor, Fox and Friends, Your World with Nell Cavuto, and Hannity and Combs, CNN's Larry King Live, and Paula Zahn Now, and MSNBC's Hardball, and Chris Matthews. Unfortunately, one of the sadder claims to Deborah's fame is that she lost her brother on September 11th, 2001. Her brother Chip had been the airline pilot whose plane had been flown into the Pentagon that fateful day 10 years ago. Without further ado, here's Deborah Burlingame. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Can you all hear me? I can hear me. So we just marked the 10th anniversary of the terrorist attacks on our nation. 9/11 anniversary is always a tough day for 9/11 families. We are living 9/11 every day of the year. It's not a date that comes once a year. But I found the media attention to the anniversary a bit of an ordeal because they treat it as sort of a one-time experience and a day that we can now reflect back at asking some rhetorical questions such as, are we safer? Is 9/11 over? Thanks. Is 9/11 over? Did we overreact? That's one of my favorite ones. Were we gripped by a collective hysteria? I'd like to point out that the enemy doesn't think in anniversaries. They recognize them only because we do. They think in, not in decades, but in centuries. They don't think about individual lives. They think about generations. I'd like to put my remarks in context by giving you a little factual information that I call 9/11 by the numbers. And I'm always struck by how many people, even though they saw the planes hit, they saw the video, and they've seen it many times over the years, they don't know this. And I'd like to say it with a special respect to Geraldine Davies sitting there, who lost her daughter, Amy, in the North Tower. She worked at Cantor Fitzgerald. 2,977 people were killed. It is very much believed that if Flight 11 had hit the North Tower 15 minutes later, that number would have been exponentially larger. Those people were torn to pieces. Ground Zero, over a period of nine months, produced 21,817 body parts. 783 were found in 2005 and 2006 on the rooftops and in the sewers. We think of Ground Zero as a 16-acre plot, but the fact of the matter is that rubble and organic matter and human parts were flung all over lower Manhattan from river to river, and the dust drifted as far away as Brooklyn. 40% of the victims were never recovered. 1,122 families were given no remains. They had no one to bury. At the Pentagon, that scene alone was very much overshadowed by the World Trade Center, understandably. But that was a scene of incredible devastation. 15 of the first responders retired. They were so disturbed by what they experienced there. 40,000 pounds of jet fuel in a confined area. 5 of the victims were never found, including a 3-year-old girl who was killed with her entire family. United 93, that plane hit the ground at 570 miles per hour. The passengers were basically vaporized. They only collected 8% of those remains. The first responders upon arrival, I know there were a lot of documentaries that covered this leading up to the anniversary, but I think it bears reminder when we have these speakers come to you what the first responders had to cope with in this catastrophic mass casualty attack. When they arrived on the scene, they were greeted with the sight of jumpers. Approximately 200 people jumped from those higher floors, exploding on impact. There were bloody and charred human body parts littering the streets. It was very dangerous down there. A 1 foot inch of World Trade Center steel, 1 foot is about 400 pounds. 289 whole bodies were recovered. I use the term loosely. Only 5 of those people were able to be identified by visual sight. The rest could only be identified by DNA. Property. The collision of American aviation technology and American skyscraper engineering. What we had were WMDs hitting us that day. 12 million square feet of office space was lost. In 9 months, they cleared away 1.8 million tons of rubble. People think of the World Trade Center as the 2 towers. In fact, there were 7 buildings that were destroyed. The Marriott Hotel was 22 stories high, gone. Building 7 was 52 stories high, gone. 2 other buildings that are not even mentioned in that 7-building count are Deutsche Bank on the south perimeter of that 16 acres, and Fitterman Hall, which is outside the 16 acres, and by the way, on the same street as the so-called Ground Zero Mosque, just a few feet away. That had to be torn down because it was so full of toxic waste and organic material, right next to the Ground Zero Mosque. In October, another thing that people forget when they ask, did we overreact? We had an anthrax attack. 23 people were hospitalized and 5 were killed. That weaponized anthrax was sent very strategically to the media and to members of Congress. You can't overstate how frightening this was to the general public. Whoever sent that, I don't believe has been conclusively resolved. But it added to the sense of urgency. No one asked, will we be hit again? It was when. And so you had Congress, in a rare moment of nonpartisanship, pass the Patriot Act 45 days later. In October, you had the NSA domestic terrorist surveillance program. That was, the leaders of the intelligence committees were briefed on that and said, good to go. We had the president go to the leaders of his intelligence agencies and say, what can we do that we're not doing? They instituted the RDI program, rendition, detention, interrogation, because everyone said, we don't have the intelligence. We don't have the actionable intelligence. We need to get it, and we need to get it fast. And I would like to remind all of you, or maybe you don't know, that in the Golani case that was litigated last year, the Holder Justice Department called the RDI program in one of its briefs when they were defending it against a speedy trial action in the Golani case. They called it, I got to get the exact quote, reasonable, rational, and a valuable program that saved lives. That's out of Holder's Justice Department.